All right, class, today we're taking a look at which cells are most impacted by CF, or cystic fibrosis, and we're trying to figure out why this might be. So if we look at some basic information, so we went over this at the beginning of our activity, but let's just go over it again. So there are different types of cells within the human body. In fact, there's tons of different types of cells. And some of the cells within our body are considered specialized cells. So they have a really specific job and they have a specific structures as well. So these are called specialized cells, like the ones we saw in the activity in class. Now, there are also some generalized cells that look more similar to the ones that we would see in the, if you just Googled like animal cell, okay, and what we saw in the past weeks in class. Remember that the specialization of cells is really specific to multicellular organisms. So unicellular organisms do not have this ability to specialize because their one body cell has to do everything. So this is only possible in multicellular organisms like us. So here are some examples of specialized cells. Okay, so they could include a red blood cell, a nerve cell, and a sperm cell. So the red blood cell was not in our simulation, but just so we know, its job is to carry oxygen to all of our cells around our body. Our nerve cell, we said its job was to send and receive signals in response to some type of stimulus in the environment. So that'd be if you burned your finger, or if your teacher asked you a question, or if someone accidentally poked you in the side, okay, you would be able to respond to that, okay, quickly. The sperm cell's job is to swim and to find an egg for reproduction so that, babies can happen, right, to continue the human race. So then if we look, we're trying to figure out which cells, so specifically which cells, I'm going to underline that, in the lungs and intestines are altered by cystic fibrosis. So we're just trying to zoom in to where we're talking about, because we've talked about the lungs and we know people are coughing and we know that people have trouble absorbing nutrients and sometimes have trouble going to the bathroom as well. But let's take a look at these two systems. So first, within your throat, you have two tubes. So you have the trachea and the esophagus. So the trachea actually leads into the lungs. The esophagus leads into the stomach for the digestion of food. So if you ever hear someone say something went down the wrong pipe, okay, that simply means that maybe they got some food or some water in their trachea. And sometimes that happens if you're drinking water and you laugh or you're just not paying attention, okay, and then you start coughing. So I'm sure that's happened to everybody. So that just means maybe a little bit of stuff got in the trachea that wasn't supposed to be there. So the trachea is supposed to be for air. So if you follow the trachea then breaks apart into smaller tubes. So it breaks first in two. So these are the bronchial tubes, and then it breaks further down, or kind of branches apart into smaller and smaller tubes. So these are the bronchial tubes. Then there's the esophagus on the other side. So the esophagus, it leads into the stomach. Again, when you're digesting food, the food then goes into your small intestine and then into this large intestine and then out the exit, or the anus. So if we look, okay, we said that people's main problems were occurring in the small intestine. So we're going to do a little zoom into what cells might look like here, and another zoom into which cells we're looking at in these bronchial tubes. So we're looking specifically at one specialized cell first, because we know that the problem with the cystic fibrosis patients is mucus. So it starts with mucus and problems with mucus. So I want to know, where is all the mucus coming from? So in fact, the mucus comes from our own bodies. So you have cells that are specialized to just make mucus. So these cells, and you should definitely draw out this goblet cell. Okay, so we want to have a picture of a goblet cell. These are cells that are specialized in making mucus. That's their job. So if we zoom in here and here, so we're not looking at all the cells, we're just focused on this one type of specialized cell, okay? Within the bronchial tubes and in the intestines as well, we have some of these goblet cells to make mucus. So if we look inside, okay, first off, they have all the standard parts as well. So I drew some of them. So here I have my endoplasmic reticulum. Here we got the Golgi. Here we've got the nucleus. And then we'd also have, of course, I'm just going to draw these things that look like, hopefully, kind of like the mitochondria that we saw in our other simulation. Okay, so here's some mitochondria. Perfect. But then if we look, so our Golgi produces these vesicles, and this cell is got a huge concentration of vesicles toward the top or toward this surface of it. Okay, so this is kind of like the surface of the cell, and if you look, it's not symmetrical, so this is kind of like the surface of the cell, and this is the back end of our cell. So if we are looking at all of these vesicles, so all of these vesicles that are within this goblet cell contain mucus. I'm going to make my mucus green, okay? So the main ingredient in mucus is referred to as mucin. So there's even, and I don't know if they saw it here, but there's a drug in the US that's if you have like a cold or a super runny nose, you can take Mucinex, which is supposed to help you get rid of mucus. So this is mucin, okay? It contains mucin, a certain type of chemical that's really prevalent in mucus. So these vesicles move from the center of the cell where they'd be produced, and they start moving toward the upper surface of this cell. All right, you also notice this has these little finger-like extensions as well on that one surface. So they start migrating toward that one side of the cell, and what they end up doing is when they meet the membrane, they actually kind of fuse with the outer part of the membrane, and they eject or spit out this mucus. So then we start getting this mucus on the top part of the cells, okay, and possibly moving over if there's some neighboring cells as well as we build more and more up. We're getting some lovely mucus on this surface. All right, so as we get more, okay, as we move more up there, we're going to get more and more mucus. And this happens in all people. So this is normal. Okay, you have these cells. A person with cystic fibrosis has these cells. I have these cells. Your mom and dad have these cells. Everyone. Okay, so it's normal to have these goblet cells, these mucus-producing cells. Totally normal. Okay, so make sure you sketched out. Remember, special structures. Here we've got tons and tons of vesicles full of mucin. So remember, that's just the main ingredient for mucus. Okay, so if you want to make mucus, you need some mucin. So then let's see what's coming next, okay? So we want to try and figure out now, like, why the heck do we need mucus? Like, why does my body produce mucus? Right? And in fact, it has some really great benefits. So we produce mucus in our airway in particular, but in other locations as well. In our airway in particular, it helps to lubricate the surface. This would be important in your intestines as well, okay, because things are moving through there regularly, so we want to have a nice moist surface so the cells don't dry out and die. We also need it to trap dirt and dust, and possibly to trap some bacteria, especially if they're inhaled. So if you go out on a really dusty day, you get some dust in your body, we don't want them getting into the very, very smallest branches of those bronchial tubes in your lungs. We want to try and trap them in the airway, and then maybe you can, cough them up and just get rid of it. So we want to trap that dirt and dust. And in that way, it's awesome, okay? So mucus is really good at doing stuff like that. So now we want to know, like, what's the difference then? So if we all make mucus, we all need mucus, and we all have these goblet cells, then what's the difference between the normal and the CF patient? So we're going to look at a little zoom, okay? So we'll side by side, but let's look at our normal person. So our normal person, we know, so this is just the same information that we already got from our research and from our background information. Our normal person does have mucus, so they have mucus lining their bronchial tubes. I tried to draw, if we zoom in here, so I should have drew a line, but if we zoom in right here, instead of just drawing one goblet cell, I tried to draw like a group of cells just on the surface of that bronchial tube. So you'll see we have some other types of cells, and then we have these two goblet cells. They kind of look like little feet in this, so I'm sorry, but that's the best I could do. So we've got some goblet cells here, and their job is to produce the mucus to make this nice, thin, watery mucus layer within a normal person, okay? So that's what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to be thin, it's supposed to have a high water concentration, okay? It's supposed to flow easily. That's what we're looking for. Now, in our cystic fibrosis person, we know that that's not exactly the case. So when we zoom in here, they have the same cells, okay? But something is different. Something different is happening. So I'll try and, I don't know how to make this look like thick, make it lumpy or something. Okay, so we got some lumpy, thick, sticky mucus on this person's bronchioles, okay, the bronchial tube. So we've got this thick, sticky mucus here. And that's not normal, and that's what causes a lot of these problems, okay? There's a lot of these problems with the coughing and the breathing, is that this gets trapped. So it doesn't flow easily. It's really hard to cough up. That's why they have those vests and those machines to help them breathe and to help them loosen their mucus, as well as why they were getting those massages. So then, information from research. So this is what we already were told in at least, I think, several of the classes where we had people do some excellent research. So the class told us that there's something wrong with some sort of membrane protein in people with CF. So I know that we got some information about the membrane protein for sure in the first class. So they talked about, I mean, really, the specific and scientific information was found in those readings, but what we're talking about is there's some sort of problem with one of the membrane proteins in some of our cells. That's what we know, okay? So now I'm going to ask you to do the following. So I want you to think like a research scientist, okay? And not just any research scientist, but a person who really wants to come up with some sort of cure for CF. So I want you to think about, what do we actually need to know now? So we know this, right? This is observable. Okay, these things are observable. Thick, sticky mucus, that's observable. We can see that. Okay, that's an observation that we can make. We can also observe that people who are normal have the thinner, watery mucus. But if we want to try to fix this problem, okay, for these people who have cystic fibrosis, what do we need to know now? Okay, so we know they have this thick, sticky mucus. We know from our research that there's something wrong with the membrane protein, but what things do you need to know as the research scientist in order to better understand the disease and how we could possibly cure it? So that's what I want you to think about, and I think I might even add a little comment under the notes, and I want you to come up with your ideas, okay? So post your ideas just to participate and try and figure out which road we're going to take next in this class. So where are we going to go from here? What do we need to know next if we're supposed to be helping these people who have this disease, okay? So remember, you can pause, go back. Your drawing or your notes should include some drawings. So I would think about drawing the goblet cell, okay, thinking about looking at these, organs and the structures within them and thinking about that mucus, all right? So important, just to help you remember the parts and to think about the goblet cell and the structures, it's important to sketch it. So I will talk to you very soon.